This is Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review, speaking with Ronnie Woodward of the Daily Reflector. Got that right, Ronnie?
That's right. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for joining me. We're going to talk some ECU basketball. First off, how long have you been with the Reflector?
Um, Man, that's a somewhat loaded question. I started there when I was an intern in college. So about 12 years, full time, more about 10 to 12 range is, I guess, the easiest answer there.
Okay.
But yeah, dating back for a while, but mainly been on the ECU basketball beat full time here for the last 3 years, 4 years.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, done a lot of different things, football and baseball mainly with ECU, but have picked up basketball for sure during the Dooley era and the last few seasons here.
Okay. Well, that leads me to you brought up Coach Dooley these last 3 or 4 years. How do you think he's done in his return back to ECU?
Uh, it's a totally different situation, and really, I go back to his intro press conference here. I remember asking him, "What do you know about the American?" And he said, "Well, when I was here the first time in the '90s, it was the CI or the CAA Colonial,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, before Colonial kind of had its rise after then, but in the '90s, that was a one bid league. It was, hey, win your conference tournament, you're going to the NCAAs." That was kind of what they did at ECU. So that was the ECU he used to know. But as you know, when he got back here the second time before last season, I mean, it's a 4, 5, 6 maybe bid league. It's not just you got to win your conference tournament. I mean, you have Houston, you have Wichita State, you had Connecticut, past tense, but
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati. I mean, it's a much different situation. So so he's done good in general. I mean, not necessarily in the league and in wins and losses, and but he's recruited hard. I mean, he came in and wiped slate really on the roster after the first season. Added a ton of JUCO transfers and is recruiting and is trying to flip the roster because I think he got here and realized what they had wasn't American quality.
Okay.
And again, it's not Conference USA. It's not the CAA, which he was used to in his first run in Greenville. So I think the good thing about him is he has the longest leash maybe in the league. I
Okay.
mean, if because he's won here before, he has family ties to Eastern North Carolina. They made this hire expecting it to be a long-term deal, and that's why I think you saw the roster movement and the recruiting and the different things he's done. I think is related to just the comfort level they have with him long term. So again, without just breaking down the wins and losses and saying, "Oh, he hasn't been great," I think it's part of a bigger plan. And
Mm-hmm.
Jayden Gardner has been great. They're their best players. It's a matter of getting maybe a few of those guys or getting enough depth to compete in the league, especially. So we'll see how that goes. And I think this is an important year in that process, though, for sure. They got to turn this into wins at some point. And this year, potentially, depending on how it all plays out, obviously would be a big year to do that.
And since you brought up Jayden Gardner, he and I ran into him at Conference Media Day last year. And when I said to him, my last name is Gardner as well, Kris Gardner, he's like, oh, so we don't believe we're related, but we always, every so often on Twitter, joke about being kinfolk. So what's the story about how Jayden ended up at ECU? Because he's a heck of a talent, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, he like a lot of kids, or at least some kids in North Carolina. Um, he was, and actually, I saw him play in high school. He played in Greenville and Minges Coliseum in the Eastern Regionals here in high school. But he's from the Wake Forest, Raleigh kind of area. Um, and I think they list him now at 6'6", 6'7", maybe. But
Mm-hmm.
he's more in the 6'4", 6'5" range, pretty much. So he was a great high school post player,
Okay.
basically. But if you're a 6'4", 6'5" post player, you're not going to Duke. You're not going to UNC or Wake Forest, NC State. So he's an undersized four,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how he got to ECU. And that's how they've gotten some of those guys who are an undersized four or a a center who's 7 foot, but maybe really raw, or a point guard that's small, or a shooter that, I think obviously in basketball, just the height and the recruiting dynamic in this state, Jeremy Ingram, or not Jeremy Ingram, Brandon Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Ingram went to ECU, but Brandon Ingram is from Kinston, obviously the NBA player. He had all the tools. That's a guy where ECU kind of knew from the start, hey, he's probably not coming to ECU. He went to Duke. There's some of those guys from the Kinston, East North Carolina area that go to UNC, they go to Duke. The Gardner thing was kind of the opposite, is what I'm getting at. He was from Raleigh, got some looks from the ACC, but they weren't willing, I don't think, to offer and give him a real serious shot at it. ECU was all about it, and it worked out really well. So, and again, he's undersized now, and now the thing is, hey, he's putting up great numbers. He's perfect fit for ECU. Can he play in the NBA? And he's probably getting a lot of the same things he's getting at a high school that he's now going to get from NBA guys as well. You're not obviously a 6'5" NBA post player, so that's just kind of his deal. He's a little unorthodox. He's undersized. But, man, he can score. He can rebound. He's an awesome kid. Great kid to see him around campus. Talk to him. Really good kid. He plays super hard. So, yeah, he's a great fit for ECU. And that's kind of what I referenced earlier, that even though Dooley has a long-term plan and wants to build this up long-term, the window of Jayden Gardner has 2 seasons left, maybe 3 or whatever. So, there's a balance, and that's why I think they need to win while they have Gardner, because I don't know if they'll have a player like him again, or you can't count on having that type of player.
Sure.
I mean, he could be the all-time leading scorer by the time that he's done in school history and break a ton of records and do a lot of things. So obviously you want to take advantage of that when you have that window.
Okay, so give me an overview of this roster for the coming season. I looked at it, and the website has, I think, 18 players listed, and 16 have classification. There are maybe like 2 that I don't know if they're walk-ons or what, but an overall breakdown of the roster. How many? Not a lot of freshmen from
Yeah, and that plays into, I'm looking at the roster now as well here. That plays into what they did before last year with kind of the full JUCO transformation. So you have a lot of seniors on this roster coming up who were JUCOs last year, junior additions last year. But they also did a decent job spreading it out. Some of the guys they added last year were sophomores. So you have that junior, senior group. It's not your typical, you look at a college basketball roster, oh, man, they have 5 seniors and 6 juniors. They've probably played together for 4 years. That's definitely not the case with this crew. It's really they played together last year because they all came from a Mississippi college or this junior college or transferred from this other school. Aside from really Jayden Gardner, it was him plus a lot of other, transfer guys that came in. So, again, it's even though it's a veteran group in theory, when you look at the classes, it's still a work in progress. And I think last year was really a lot of that. Them learning to play together, who does what, that type of thing. Where, again, in theory, this year you shouldn't have some of those growing pains. I mean, they got off to a really rough start the first 10, 12 games of last year, and that was because of that. They had some injuries, some preseason stuff, but a lot of it was, hey, here's 11 new players plus Jayden Gardner. Here's a basketball and go kind of figure it out. That's not your ideal scenario for the first month or so of the season. And basically, it's the same team. It's the same guys. They're just hoping that a year of working together and a year more of experience that it'd be a smoother product this year, especially early in the season, like I said, because it was an experiment the first month or so of last season.
How has the pandemic impacted ECU, the campus, the city, things like that?
Yeah, it's they kind of, in general, they kind of went the basketball players came back kind of late summer, mid to late summer. They had one pause. It was a university-wide pause for all sports activities. It lasted about a week, maybe a little over a week in late July. They returned from that. So basketball-wise, they've had some off-season, informal type of conditioning workouts, small group type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the campus and city at large, it's weird because athletics kind of got that figured out right before August, and then ECU was one of those where the students came back, all students,
Mm-hmm.
on campus, and they were going to have in-person class and all that. As you could guess, and have seen elsewhere, that lasted, I think, a week, if that.
Okay.
And then campus shut back down. Most of the student population left. They had to move out of the dorms, minus athletes. You could get a waiver, so athletes are still here. If you're an international student, different type of things, you're still in the dorm. But by and large, they shut it down for the fall semester, went to online, tried to get most students out of here, and keep the athletes here to create that bubble or whatever, however you want to describe
Sure.
it, of trying to keep the athletes here and safe and trying to practice and move forward. So they had great envisions of it working like a lot of other universities.
Right.
And everybody's going to mix and mingle and you wear your mask and this is going to be fine. And it didn't make it a week before that they had to remix that for sure. And now the athletes, I assume, are keeping to each other, but from my vantage point, we don't get access. I mean, we're in football mode, football season right now, covering that, and I haven't seen a practice. I haven't seen a scrimmage.
Yeah,
everything is in Zoom. So in general, I can describe that they're trying to keep the teams and the athletes as safe and as bubble as they can. It's not easy, obviously. They test all the time, and they've had ups and downs with that. With football, so once basketball gets closer and you have games and you start traveling, could end up with the same type of situation, I'm sure. But yeah, they're trying to get it as best as they can. And the first step in that was about a month and a half ago. Of going from online or in-person classes to online and trying to get most of the normal student population off of campus.
With the NCAA announcing November 25th as the start date for the season, where do things stand for Coach Dooley and the staff for non-conference games that they had scheduled, and how are things going for remaining non-conference games?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. So much that I don't have an exact, kind of clear idea or answer with it. But I know, I think they're looking at, maybe one or two of those tournaments, to get a handful of non-conference games in. That way we can do it all at one venue, knock it out, play 3 or 4 teams in 3 or 4 days. So it's a condensed schedule. And I think saw even yesterday or last night, the Americans thinking of 20 conference games or 20 games total. So non-conference wise, I don't think ECU is going to play a ton, but I know they were involved in a tournament anyway. I think they're weighing right now if they want to stay in that or not, and they probably will, or do they want to go to a different one or what? But I think they're looking at one of those situations as a tournament, and then maybe having 1 or 2 games in December, a non-conference game. Again, the North Carolina thing really works out well because you have UNC Wilmington, the Campbell, Charlotte. There's a lot of teams they play annually. Appalachian State, they've added the last few years here. So it wouldn't surprise me if you see one of those teams, a UNCW, even Gardner-Webb. There's a lot of different teams in this area that they can take a bus to and really maybe even play the day of. You travel up, you kind of play the game, you get on the bus and you go back home, and you don't worry a whole lot about flights and travel and that type of stuff. So I think it'll be a little bit of a mix and match, but I don't think they're going to have a very large non-conference schedule. My guess is maybe just a handful of games or whatever kind of fits best with the tournament, and maybe a game or two in addition.
Assuming everything is official with the conference going to 20 games for this year, 20 conference games, what are your thoughts on that? 20 games for the conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the thing that I worry about big picture with all sports with the American, again, is the travel. So I still kind of have a wait and see approach with that because, again, as you know, I think football comes first. And if
Sure.
football can't pull off a schedule with flights and, traveling from Tulsa to Temple to Central Florida to Greenville to Houston, if that can't work in football, I have my serious doubts that can work in basketball multiple times a week, or nonetheless a volleyball program or soccer, trying to make those trips. Because it's not a knock on the American. It's a really good league, but geographically, it's not a good league.
Very
There's
spread
a
out.
reason. Yeah, it's the reason why the SEC only wants to play football against each other, because Mississippi State can play Mississippi and Florida can play Georgia, and it's somewhat confined. So yeah, that's my general first thought. Not to go straight to the COVID travel route, but I hope they pull it off. And again, to me, that starts with football. I really hope they pull off football, and the travel doesn't just create too many problems where that has a trickle down effect to the other sports. And just talking from other coaches at ECU, even down to a volleyball coach, a soccer coach, basketball, whatever, they are very much in that same mindset, is the sense that I get as well, that they want football to work and pull it off. That can only help the other sports. So that's where I'm kind of at with it now. And basketball wise, the American is deep, obviously. It's a good league, like we talked about earlier. There's a handful of teams that are in consideration for the NCAAs usually, and it's not easy for ECU. You stack Houston and Wichita State and Cincinnati and those teams' history against ECU, it's not even close, obviously. So if it was a game of history and tradition, the Pirates would be in big trouble. But they're more or less working toward the future and trying to step up to that level right now, for sure.
With football, for the conference games, is the plan to bus to the games or to fly? Do you know that?
I don't know how you can bus, to be honest. At least in ECU situation. Temple is drivable. Cincinnati maybe is drivable. But yeah, all indications I have seen is there's going to be chartered flights. Like tomorrow, this week, ECU's first game is against Central Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Central Florida and ECU are getting COVID tests Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And after that Friday test, UCF in Florida is waiting until those results come back. The game is 100% cleared. Let's do it. And then they're flying to Greenville the day before. So, that's what I was kind of getting at earlier. There's a lot that's going into this football thing. Aside from UCF against South Florida, I'm sure that's a lot easier to pull off, or a couple of the Houston or Texas teams, or maybe Tulane you can throw in that mix. But with ECU, there's nobody close. When Temple and Cincinnati are your closest conference teams, and those are a handful of states away, that adds a lot of logistics. So as far as I know, they're going to be flying to all conference games. And again, that means you have to wait until you have a game before you actually board that flight, and get up in the air and start your destination.
And you touched on the travel aspect of it. What is the thought on campus of ECU being in the American? Is it beneficial? Are there more benefits? Are there more pros than cons to being in the American for ECU?
Yeah, it varies, but I think people who really understand it get it. That financially, there's no question, especially with the new TV deal just worked out with ESPN. ECU and probably a lot of other schools in the American and nationwide are having issues right now with finances during the pandemic. I couldn't imagine where ECU would be at if they were still in Conference USA. Because you're dealing with the same travel. Conference USA, a lot of the teams in the American used to be in Conference USA, and it was the same travel. So it's not like ECU could say, "Oh, we're going to go back to Conference USA and save money." You're really not. You would go back and have the same travel issues and be bringing in less revenue from TV and exposure, et cetera. So, I think there's some people who maybe don't understand all the finances and the model of revenue and TV that say, well, why is ECU playing Tulsa and playing Houston and playing Tulane? But again, when you look at, there's not a whole lot of other options unless somehow they are granted a lucky wish and they join the ACC and they get to play NC State and UNC and that type of thing, and make a lot of money for it to be in that conference, which is probably never ever going to happen. The American's the best fit. Again, the geography is far from ideal. It's not great, but financially and competitiveness and the exposure you get in football and basketball, especially, and ECU is the best baseball program in the conference. If you look at those three sports, because ECU, it sounds weird to say, because probably a lot of schools in the American don't care much about baseball, or it's not a big deal, but it's a huge deal here at ECU. I mean, baseball and basketball, a lot of years are neck and neck as far as interest with fans, honestly.
Okay.
Because it's a national type program every year with baseball. So the competition and exposure is no doubt, it's a great league. And the finances are big with the ESPN deal. So I think most people, if you poll it and they really know what they're understanding and talking about, they're going to say the American's a good league for ECU. It's just the travel to me right now is heightened. The negative of the travel and geography is heightened because of COVID. If COVID wasn't a thing, geography and travel is still not great, but probably not as much of a limitation or as big of a deal as it is right now, just because everything we're dealing with. Nobody wants to get on a flight right now. Right. I mean, I used to cover I cover every single football game no matter what. We've been to Hawaii Bowls.
Okay.
Every single flight in the American, and I'm not traveling this year. I'm covering games from my couch. So that just is a personal story about, getting on flights is not encouraged and not something a lot of people want to do right now. And that plays into this league and its games.
Well, you lead into one of my next questions about travel. How many games, like for basketball, did you go to road games in last season or previous seasons?
Not in the conference, because again, I mean, but UNCW, if they play in NC State, a Campbell, even a VCU or a Richmond, maybe if it's in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, definitely have made those trips before. Anything that's drivable with basketball, usually, and again, do the same for baseball. ECU plays a lot of baseball, ACC schools, and usually if it's drivable, hey, let's go make that trip. It's easy to do. But football is the only sport where, again, we used to go no matter what. I mean, BYU at ECU at BYU 4 or 5 years ago, we made that flight. But usually that's a football only thing, just because it's such a different animal, and that there's one game a week. I mean, there's one game. I mean, right now this year ECU has 9 games. That's different from, hey, get on this basketball flight to go play Houston and then come back and there's another game 3 days later. Right. It's just a different setup from just my standpoint and the my outlet, the newspaper's standpoint. Basketball usually has to be a driving thing, and again, in the American, that's not many, if at all, for ECU.
How has work at the paper changed for you in terms of going to digital, going online? From I think 10 or 12 years ago, how have things changed at the Reflector?
Yeah, it's obviously it's changed a ton. I mean, I could probably tell a ton of stories here, but I remember, I mean, maybe my easiest story from my personal experiences, I remember when I first kind of started, I was on the high schools beat, kind of working my way up, but we went into the office every day at 4:00. And that was when our shift started. You went in at 4:00, you worked on whatever your stories, your layout for print, whatever it was through the night, and you wrapped it up at the end of the night, because that was kind of the news cycle, that you print out the paper, and then the next morning, whatever we worked on the night before is what everybody got as news, and then you restart the next day. And it slowly just kind of shifted where it was like, hey, I can't sleep until 11 or noon and wait until 4 o'clock to go
Right.
to work because, news can happen at 11 p.m. It can happen at 6 a.m. It can happen at 2 p.m. The news cycle, to me, is the thing that's changed the most. And that obviously has led to, as you said, the digital side, because it's not, it's 8:30 a.m. This story just broke. Or I'm working on this. I'm going to wait until later and then do this tomorrow. It's okay. This just happened. I need to get this online in the next 30 minutes, and I need to tweet about it immediately. So the news cycle is the main thing to me. That's good and bad. I guess it's good because it keeps you on your feet, and just the way you kind of operate. The bad, my wife would probably tell me, is there's been many times we're driving to dinner or whatever, and I'm trying to enjoy some away time, and it's oh man, this just happened. I see it on my phone, and there's not that moment of I can wait until later. It's so you're saying we have to hold our reservation for 30 minutes so you can do this on your phone. It's that's the main thing for me personally, and again, social life, whatever. It's a constant thing. You're kind of always on guard, and always working stories, angles, different things, because it's pretty constant and 24/7. It's nice to get away for a beach weekend or a vacation or whatever every now and then, because you definitely need it. Compared to when I first started, it was much more of I feel like a regular kind of day and night schedule, where now it's morning, day, night, weekends, whatever, at any time, this stuff can happen, and you kind of have to be ready to react.
How big is basketball in the state of North Carolina?
It's huge. And I grew up in Garner, right outside the Raleigh area, right in the middle of NC State, Duke, North Carolina, kind of ACC country, and moved here obviously to Greenville. And it's a little different, but still that it resonates from the mountains all the way to the beach. And that's the tough thing for ECU is, especially in basketball season, you could go to the local grocery store or a Walmart or whatever, go around town and talk to people, say, hey, who's your favorite college basketball team? Not a lot of people are going to say, or it's going to be mixed. I don't say not a lot, but it's going to be mixed. People might say, oh, I'm ECU no matter what. Ice hockey, I'm an ECU fan, or, but some of them will say, well, I like ECU in football, but I root for Duke in basketball. Or I'm a Carolina fan in basketball, but in football, I'm definitely all about the Pirates. So there's a lot of that. And again, that, some people get mad about that here in Greenville. Oh, you can't do that. That's not fair. To me, whatever. I mean, it's ACC country, especially, again, that in Raleigh, the central part of the state. That's why Duke and North Carolina go to Final Fours and win national championships and have a following. That following stretches across the state. That's just the reality of the situation. And that's kind of what makes it tough for ECU to compete recruiting wise in state, because they don't have that tradition. They don't have that massive following. I mean, one of my friends went to Vegas a few years ago and said, hey, man, I saw these Duke T-shirts. It's like Duke, which is in Durham, North Carolina, has a following that's nationwide. North Carolina has fans in wherever, Michigan, Nevada, California, Texas. I mean, those two programs have that national appeal, and certainly in the state, it's a huge deal. But again, for ECU, unfortunately, that means it starts with the ACC. They have to realize that, and I think they do, and kind of navigate around that.
And with that, does Coach Dooley and the staff spend more time recruiting outside of Carolina rather than in-state?
I think it's a mix. I think they want to get in-state kids. And they had one. There's a ton of recruiting stories usually go with that. Pettiford was the guard's name, a point guard they were really on and looking at. He liked him. That was during this off season, and they were pretty confident they were going to get him. Louisville offered last minute, and he went to the ACC. He signed with Louisville. So that's kind of the problem. Again, like I talked about earlier, if you have especially in Eastern North Carolina, if there's somebody they really like, they have to get on them early and form that bond. And hey, we were the first ones to offer you.
Right.
We were the first ones to do this and that. We know your family and your dog and what whatever like that. It takes a lot of effort to do that because, again, all it takes a lot of times is, well, that person grew 2 inches and then Wake Forest offered, or NC State came in late, and it's tough. Again, the ACC thing is real here, and it's tough for a kid from Kinston or Greenville or Wilson or wherever to get that offer from NC State or obviously Duke or UNC and say, I'm going to go to ECU instead because they were on me first. That's a tough call, and they've gotten some of them, not many. So there's a reality and a danger about going too heavy in North Carolina, because if you're ECU or you're UNC Wilmington or you're Campbell or UNC Greensboro, you're getting that third, fourth option. You're not getting the best kid in the state of North Carolina. There's no chance.
Right.
So you got to be creative. And again, with this round right now with Coach Dooley, they went the transfer route before last year and said, hey, we're going to add JUCOs. And again, Jayden Gardner was a great find. That was a really good recruiting job. And that worked out well. So there's a mix, definitely. You want to have a good presence here, but you also have to think outside the box a little bit, because you're not going to just get by with in-state kids at a school like ECU.
How far is Greenville from Gastonia?
So that's right outside Charlotte. So the between 3 and 4 hour range.
Okay, so that's kind of okay, because I know U of H has gotten a few from that area, so I was just wondering how close it was to Greenville.
Yeah, it's a suburb of Charlotte for sure. So it's the western part of the state. I mean, ECU is about an hour and 15 minutes from the beach, so it's much closer to the coast than it is to that Charlotte area for sure.
Okay. Who is in basketball in conference? Does ECU have a rival? A main rival, bitter rival?
No, to be honest, no.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think so. I think it varies maybe from season to season, or if there's an interesting matchup. Or I feel like ECU and South Florida for a while were, to be honest, the bottom two teams and trying to fight out that kind of last place, kind of bottom of the order deal. I don't know if that makes it a rivalry. Obviously, that's not a good way to have a rivalry anyway. And USF kind of shot up and is more in the middle of the pack consistently these last few years. So yeah, to be honest, I don't think they do. I think in football, they had a rivalry with Southern Miss going when they were in Conference USA for a while, and Marshall, they have a lot of ties to. So there's some football ones that make a little more sense, but I think in basketball, again, I think UNC Wilmington is much more of a rival than any of the conference teams. And that's something that might develop as really, first of all, ECU gets better and develops some intense moments and intense wins or intense games. But yeah, I can't really pick one, to be honest. If I was just picking one, I'd probably be BSing it kind of and faking it. So I don't think there is.
Okay, Ronnie, we're almost done, and thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
Adding to that, piggybacking on that, is there anybody in the conference that ECU fans will come to see?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's a better approach to it, I would say. And again, when you're ECU and you're the bottom level or bottom tier of a league like this, that's a lot of the draw sometimes. ECU has a passionate fan base for sure. So when Cincinnati comes in, get Wichita State a few years ago, when they were top 10, top 5 in the country, 5, 6, somewhere in there, the place was packed. It was sold out. Because when you're the Pirates and you're a Pirate fan, it's, hey, not so much you want to see the other team, but I want to see if we can upset this team. I think that's where a lot of the if you get the really large crowds, it's not because, oh man, this is a rivalry game or this is whatever. It's, oh, Cincinnati's ranked 12th in the country. I want to be there to storm the court, be on ESPN2. And that's the draw that ECU has with its crowds right now. And that's not a bad thing in the American, again, because you're going to play ranked teams. Connecticut fell off and they left the league, obviously, but Connecticut was a huge draw when they were, the last 2 or 3 years. But Cincinnati, Wichita State, any team that's ranked, Houston obviously has been ranked the last few years when they've played here, even though they have completely owned it and crushed ECU compared to some of the other ranked teams in the league. There's a big crowd, and again, ECU has a small venue, basketball venue. You're kind of, especially the students, are right on top of the court. It's kind of like Cameron Indoor Stadium in a weird way, like Duke. It's just a small, hot, cozy type of environment, and it can get loud. Again, there's a lot of non-conference games against some random teams where there's not many people there, and it's kind of a sleepy atmosphere. But when you get a ranked team from the American in there, people show up, and again, they want to see ECU win. They want to see the team succeed. So yeah, the fan base definitely shows out for basketball. It's just not consistent. It's kind of hit or miss. And again, it depends on the opponent, really, in my opinion, more than anything.
In your opinion, what would be win-wise a successful season for ECU this year?
I think they need to get to 500 at some point. They've done it kind of the golden of the Jeff Lebo era. They won the CIT championship, the tournament. Had a winning season. I think a few winning seasons during that era. That at this point was 5, 6, 7 years ago. So they've had a run of losing seasons and some rough records, honestly, the last few years. You look at 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I think getting to 500 and ideally just having a winning season. I mean, if you go, depending on the number of games, if it's 14-12 or 13-10 or whatever it might be, that's a win. Because again, just having a winning season, I think is a realistic goal at some point while Jayden Gardner is here. I don't think they're an NCAA tournament type team, or they're not, you don't go into the season saying we're going to make a Final Four, a Sweet 16. That's a goal for every team for sure. It's not, they don't want to do that, but I think a big first step is just getting a winning season, regardless of what that number might be. That's the next kind of barrier they need to get to, and then build on that. If you finish 12-12, then the next year try and go 15-10, or whatever it might be. So I think honestly that getting 500, getting a winning record would be a huge deal for this program as soon as possible, or as soon as they can. Okay.
Ronnie Woodward of the Daily Reflector. Is there anything that you want to mention that we haven't? I got one more thing to ask you, but is there anything that you want to mention that we haven't discussed so far?
No, I've enjoyed it, so I think we're good. Yeah, whatever answer we have, we can go for it.
Okay. How can folks find you on Twitter and social media?
Okay, cool. Yeah, Ronnie W11 is my Twitter handle, and like everybody else in the world, that's where I'll lead to story links and coverage and that type of thing. So yeah, right now, to be honest, even though this is a basketball deal here, football is a huge deal and a huge part of our coverage. So I am 100% in, well, maybe not 100, but 90 whatever percent in football mode, and going to ease into basketball here, the next few weeks and next month or so. But that overlap for sure with football still going on and basketball starting up is a busy time. So have that coming up and busy, but that's why we kind of do it, so you enjoy it as well. And yeah, thanks for the plug there. Definitely on Twitter, Ronnie W11 is the follow, and yeah, go from there. So just kind of grinding it out and getting through football right now, and then basketball, and then the spring again, baseball is a really big deal. So those are the three main things that I focus on. I covered the women's basketball team a little bit as well, and they have kind of a new coach that I think is very similar to Joe Dooley of trying to build the thing up. So those programs are pretty similar, and so I'll hit men's and women's basketball here pretty soon.
Will you, or have you flown for baseball games? Like, did you come to Houston for matchups like that in the past?
We will not for regular season stuff,
Okay.
but definitely in the postseason for regionals and super regionals. That kind of goes into the football mold of we'll go. I went to Texas Tech. ECU had a super regional handful of years ago. Went to that Texas Tech series for a super regional and went to Miami the year before. So when they travel in the postseason, we typically go. But during the regular season, if it involves a plane ticket and a flight, which are not cheap usually on the fly, we'll hold out until the postseason for that with baseball.
Is baseball expected to win again in the conference?
Yeah, definitely. I would think that would probably be the preseason favorite. They're in a really good groove right now, and they're a regional type team every year. The last few years, they've hosted a regional here, so that's been nice on the pocket and on the travel budget and whatnot. Is being good enough to host regionals and NCAA events here in Greenville. It's good for the team and huge for the fans and that type of thing. So that's kind of their goal every year, honestly, in baseball, is to host here and ideally be in Greenville the whole time until you get to the College World Series in Omaha. But yeah, there's definitely times when they have to travel in the postseason as well. And they're a legit top 25 type program in baseball, and that should be the case again. They have a really good coach, one of the best coaches in the country, who's been looked at by a lot of SEC schools and big time programs. But he's an alum. He's an Eastern North Carolina guy and really wants to stay here and keep building that thing. And they have that thing rolling for sure. They're one of the best programs, top 15, 20 type program in the country, I feel like right now.
Okay, that's a great way to end it right there. Ronnie Woodward of the Daily Reflector, I thank you very much for your time, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Take care.